Adrian Mercer had never been the kind of man who feared storms, but the one building inside his own home was unlike anything he'd ever known. For 11 years, he and Clara had shared the same roof, the same dreams, the same bed. They'd built a family in the quiet suburban sprawl of Brookvale City, where neighbors waved over fences and kids rode their bikes until the streetlights came on. Their marriage had always been imperfect, but it had been theirs, sturdy, reliable, grounded in love that once felt immovable. And Adrian hadn't wanted a divorce. He still didn't. But Clara had started to change the moment she took the job at Hale & Hart, an upscale design agency downtown, the kind that advertised itself with photos of exposed brick, leather couches, and creative culture. She had been excited at first, glowing even. He'd been proud of her. 11 years as a stay-at-home mother. And now she was stepping back into the world, rediscovering her talent. At least that's what he'd thought. But Brookvale City had a way of swallowing people and spitting them out as someone unrecognizable. Clara had made new friends, young, stylish, with the kind of chaotic confidence that comes from living without consequences. They dragged her out for late-night drinks, rooftop parties, and spontaneous weekend trips. At first, Adrian believed it was just her finding balance after years of diapers and PTA meetings. But then the phone started turning face down whenever he walked into the room. Then came the first missed dinners. Then came the new perfume, something faintly sweet and musky, something she'd never worn for him. She laughed differently now, too loud, too unrestrained, like she was rehearsing a life that didn't include him. The accusations started soon after. "You smother me, Adrian. You never listen. You treat me like I'm one of the kids. I'm tired of your control." Control? He barely asked where she was going, much less when she'd be home. He'd always given her freedom, more than most husbands he knew, but Clara had built a version of him in her mind, and now she swung that image at him every chance she got. He held on to patience longer than he should have. He tried date nights. He tried counseling. He tried giving her space. But every apology he offered was met with deeper hostility. The warmth in her eyes disappeared, replaced with frost. Her late-night walks stretched past midnight. Her phone buzzed with messages she refused to open in his presence. She began dressing differently, too. Shorter skirts, tighter dresses, the kind that seemed meant for someone else's gaze. And then, one cold Sunday morning, he found the truth. It started with her laptop, left open, on the kitchen counter. Clara hated when anyone touched her devices, something she'd never cared about before. He wasn't snooping. He wasn't even looking for anything. He was simply closing the lid so their son Daniel didn't spill juice onto it. But a notification banner glowed before the screen dimmed. Ethan Ward. "You free tonight? Same place? Don't ghost me this time." His stomach dropped. He clicked, slowly, hesitantly, and what he saw gutted him. Messages going back 5 weeks, inside jokes, late-night confessions, plans for meetups, and pictures. Nothing pornographic, but nothing innocent either. Clara leaning against a bar counter, dressed tight, smile playful in a way she never smiled at him anymore. Clara biting her lip. Clara writing, "Let's keep it simple. No emotions, okay? My husband doesn't need to know." That one sentence hit him harder than anything else. He didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't break anything. He simply froze, a numb cold washing over him. It wasn't honesty. It wasn't a cry for help. It was betrayal. Deliberate, calculating, and repeated. And then came Monday, the second Monday of December, the night everything unraveled. Clara walked in after 11 p.m., smelling like the same musky perfume, cheeks flushed, hair tousled. She barely looked at him as she kicked off her heels. "Clara," he said quietly, "we need to talk." She sighed dramatically, like a teenager asked to do homework. "What now, Adrian?" "I want the truth." Her eyes flicked away. Her hand tightened on her purse. Her jaw clenched. He knew, but he didn't expect what came next. "Fine," she said. "If you really want to talk, I want to ask you something too." She looked him straight in the eyes, unapologetic, unashamed. "What do you think about a more open marriage?" It felt like a slap. "A what?" "You heard me. I need freedom. I'm tired of pretending I'm someone I'm not." His voice trembled. "Just tell me the truth, Clara." She rolled her eyes. "Why do you always have to make everything dramatic?" He stayed silent, and perhaps that silence finally broke her. "Okay," she snapped. "Fine. I slept with 2 men. 2. It was just sex. Nothing else. They were married, so you can relax. None of us were looking for anything serious." "Relax. Relax." Her words echoed inside him like a cruel joke. She said it the same way someone might tell a child to calm down after spilling milk. He stared at her for several seconds before whispering, "Who are you?" But she didn't answer. Or maybe the answer was already in her actions. The next day, while Clara was at work, Adrian did something he never imagined doing. He restored her deleted data. All of it. Text messages, photos, group chats with her new friends, friends who encouraged her cheating, laughed about it, egged her on like it was a sport. And what he saw was worse than he feared. He installed monitoring software quietly, without confrontation. He put everything back exactly how she left it. Then he began packing her things, her clothes, her makeup, her little reminders of a life she'd chosen to throw away. He placed the suitcases near the front door. When Clara walked in later that evening, laughing on the phone, she froze. "Adrian, what are you doing?" He didn't yell, didn't throw the phone, didn't accuse her. He simply said, "You told me you wanted freedom. Now you have it." Her face paled. "You're kicking me out? Seriously? You made your choice. I'm just giving you what you asked for." Her mouth trembled before twisting into rage. "You think this will scare me?" "No," he said softly. "I think it'll save me." But he didn't know then that the betrayal had only begun. That night, when Clara grabbed her phone to call one of her friends, she didn't know the software Adrian had installed would send copies of those messages straight to his device. And by midnight, he saw everything. Clara wasn't heartbroken, wasn't confused, wasn't even sad. She was planning her next affair, this time with Ethan Ward. And Adrian did what any man with a broken heart and a remaining sense of justice would do. He sent the messages, every single one of them, to Ethan's wife, Marissa. And the world burned. Marissa Ward didn't wait. She didn't hesitate. According to the frantic messages she sent Adrian minutes after receiving the screenshots, she had suspected something for months. Suspicious late nights, random gym trips, a credit card charge from a motel off Route 19. But she had never imagined it was with Clara. "Give me the address," she texted. "I'm going there, now." Adrian tried to respond, to tell her to calm down, to warn her that confronting them might turn messy. But she was already gone. Her final message came 10 minutes later. "I found them." He could almost picture her, storming down the narrow hallway of that cheap roadside motel, hair wild, heart pounding, frame shaking with betrayed rage. And then the video arrived, shaky, dimly lit, furious. The motel room door burst open, and there they were, Clara and Ethan, tangled in cheap sheets, like two animals caught in headlights. Clara shrieked and scrambled to cover herself. Ethan swore loudly, reaching for a pillow like it was armor. Marissa's voice cracked as she screamed, "How could you do this to me? To our kids? With her?" Clara yelled back, but her words were messy, slurred, defensive. She looked wrong. Not just guilty. Not just caught. She looked drugged, ruined, lost. Adrian watched the video only once. That was enough. He had known betrayal had claws. But seeing it, seeing Clara in that state, did something to him. It broke something deeper than his heart. Something he didn't know had a name. He stared at the wall for nearly an hour, unable to process that this was his wife, his partner, the mother of his children. When he finally called his in-laws to tell them what had happened, the phone rang 6 times before Clara's mother answered. "Is this about Clara?" she asked, voice trembling. "We've been worried. She hasn't come home in days." Adrian explained what he could, though there was no gentle way to describe what their daughter had done. There was a long silence, followed by her mother whispering, "We don't know who she is anymore." They didn't. Neither did he. The next evening, Clara tried to go to Adrian's parents' house, screaming at them through the porch door that she deserved to see her kids. His parents refused to let her in. She pounded on the door until the neighbors threatened to call the police. Adrian heard about it from his mother afterward, her voice shaking. "She's not well, Adrian. Something's wrong with her." He knew. He knew better than anyone. But how do you fix someone who doesn't want to be found? The conversation with the children was the worst moment of his entire life. Daniel was 9. Lily was 7. He sat them on the couch, forcing himself to keep his voice steady even though everything inside him was crumbling. "Your mom," he began, but his throat closed. He started again. "Your mom won't be staying with us for a while." Daniel frowned. "Did she go on another work trip?" "No," Adrian whispered. She doesn't want to be part of our family right now." Lily's chin trembled. But why? He had no answer. Because there wasn't one. Daniel stared at the floor, fists tight, trying to be strong the way he always did. "Did we do something wrong?" "No," Adrian said, pulling them into his arms. "You didn't do anything wrong. None of this is your fault." But the truth, the full, brutal truth, was that Clara had chosen strangers over them. Strangers who fed whatever addiction, thrill, or darkness she'd fallen into. That night, after he put the kids to bed, Adrian sat alone in the living room, staring at the cold fireplace. He texted Clara one final time. "You're free now, but you're no longer my wife." She didn't reply. He announced the divorce 2 days later. His voice didn't shake, though everything inside him felt hollow. Christmas lights were already hanging on the neighborhood houses, the city glowing with holiday warmth, but he felt none of it. He still loved her. That was the part that killed him. You don't lose 11 years without its absence becoming a phantom limb. You don't kill love like a switch. He hated himself for still caring. He hated her for making him care. That December became the darkest time in his life. But fate, or maybe just luck, sent him 3 men who refused to let him drown. Lucas Hale, an old college friend who'd survived his own hellish divorce. Ryan Cole, a co-worker with a painful past and a heart too big for his chest. Matthew Price, his neighbor and the godfather of his kids. They showed up without asking. Lucas arrived first, stepping inside with 2 bags of groceries and 0 judgment. "You're not going to starve while I'm around," he said, dropping a bag of frozen meals onto the counter. "And you're sure as hell not going to go through this alone." Later that night, Lucas sat beside him on the back porch, nursing a beer. "She's not the same woman you married," he said quietly. "I've seen this before. People fall into holes so deep, they forget there's a world above them." "I can't stop loving her." "That's because you're human," Lucas said. "But loving her doesn't mean letting her destroy you." Ryan came the next day with a different kind of help. "I talked to my guy," he said, handing Adrian a business card. "Top-tier family attorney. He'll take your case, free of charge." "Ryan, I can't." "You can. And you will. Your kids need you to." Matthew helped the way he always did, quietly, steadily, without asking for anything. He watched the kids, cooked meals, fixed the broken kitchen cabinet. "You don't owe us anything," he said, when Adrian tried to thank him. "This is what friends do." For the first time in weeks, Adrian allowed himself to breathe. But the fight was only beginning. His attorney, sharp, relentless, and frighteningly efficient, started gathering evidence for the custody battle. Adrian provided everything he had: the messages, the videos, the restored data. And then came the medical tests. He'd gone in for a routine screening, just because the nurse had recommended it. He never expected the call. "Mr. Mercer, your test came back positive for chlamydia." He had never cheated on Clara. Not once. Not ever. The truth hit him like a truck. Clara had brought home more than lies. For the first time since the unraveling began, Adrian felt pure, white-hot resolve. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about survival, about protecting his children from the storm their mother had become. And then came the meeting with Nathan Briggs, and everything turned darker. Nathan Briggs arrived late in the afternoon, stepping out of his dusty pickup with the tired posture of a man who had lived too many versions of the same tragedy. Adrian had never met him before, but he recognized him instantly from the stories Clara used to tell, back when she still told stories, back when she still came home. Nathan was the ex-husband of one of Clara's new friends, though friend wasn't the right word. Parasite was closer. They sat on the porch, 2 men bound by a disaster they hadn't chosen. Nathan rubbed a hand over his jaw, eyes narrowing as he observed the quiet street. "I heard what happened," he said finally, "and I figured you could use someone who's been through their circle." Adrian swallowed. "You mean the group Clara's been hanging around?" Nathan snorted. "They call themselves a collective to sound artistic. They're addicts, manipulators, users. And they don't like losing control of their toys." Adrian stiffened. "Clara's not a toy?" "No," Nathan agreed softly. "But they convinced her she was broken and then offered to fix her. That's how they work. They wreck families for entertainment, for drugs, for access. They'll drag anyone down with them." He leaned forward, expression grim. "And the moment you push back, they invent accusations, abuse, violence, anything they think will stick." Adrian felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "You're saying they might try that with me?" "They will," Nathan corrected. "They tried it with me. They tried to paint me as a controlling husband. Almost cost me my job. They have no limits." Adrian clenched his hands. "So what do I do?" Nathan nodded toward the house. You prepare. You document everything. You protect your kids. You get ready for a war she doesn't even understand she's part of. A war. That was exactly what it felt like. And just when Adrian thought the nightmare couldn't escalate further, the divorce process began. The first Zoom call was scheduled for a Monday morning. Adrian logged in early, nervous but steady, his attorney sitting beside him, calm as a surgeon. When Clara joined the call, she didn't look like the woman he'd loved. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes bloodshot. She wore a hoodie that seemed 2 sizes too big for her thin frame. But worse than her appearance was the hostility radiating from her as she leaned toward the camera. "So," she sneered, "you finally get what you want. Congratulations." Adrian forced his voice to remain level. "Clara, we need to discuss the custody." "Oh, we're discussing everything," she snapped. "You think you can take my kids from me? After what you've done?" Her attorney tried to calm her, but Clara wasn't in the mood to listen. "You're a manipulator," she spat. "A narcissist. You controlled me for years." Adrian's lawyer leaned forward. "Ms. Mercer, shouting false accusations will not—" Clara laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Oh, look, Adrian hired a bulldog. That's cute. What else are you hiding, Adrian? Got any drugs stashed in your pretty house?" Adrian froze. His attorney didn't. "What exactly are you implying, Ms. Mercer?" Clara leaned closer to the camera, eyes wild. "I'm implying," she said, voice trembling with venom, "that I know everything." But when the attorney handed her the settlement proposal, a straightforward, generous agreement, Clara didn't even read it. She grabbed the stylus, slammed her signature across the screen, and muttered, "Fine, whatever. I don't need anything from him." Her lawyer stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Adrian's attorney only smiled. The document was binding. The terms were solid. Custody would be decided separately. But Clara had just thrown away everything she could have negotiated, and she didn't even realize it. 3 weeks passed, just enough time for Adrian to believe the worst was behind him, until the police arrived. He was in the kitchen making dinner when bright lights swept across the windows. Someone knocked, firm, official, unmistakable. "Mr. Mercer, we have a warrant to search your property." Adrian's heart stopped. "What? Why?" The officer spoke calmly. "We received a report of illegal narcotics possibly stored in the residence." It hit him instantly. Clara. Or her friends. The search took 2 hours. The officers were professional but thorough, combing through every drawer, every cabinet, every closet. They found nothing. But the humiliation, the fear, left a crack in him he couldn't hide. When the lead officer came outside to apologize, he also delivered news Adrian didn't expect. "By the way, sir, we located your vehicle." "My vehicle?" Adrian frowned. "It was stolen 2 nights ago. You found it?" "Yes," the officer said. "It was abandoned after a collision. Multiple passengers fled the scene." Adrian's blood ran cold. "Do you know who was driving?" The officer hesitated. "We're still confirming identities, but one of the women matched the description of your estranged wife." When Adrian returned home after the ordeal, he found the house wrecked, glass shattered, drawers ripped open, furniture overturned. The sanctuary he had built for his children had been invaded, violated. His legs gave out, and he sat on the floor, staring blankly at the destruction, unable to move. His father found him like that an hour later. Without saying a word, without asking a single question, his father and Ryan and Matthew got to work, sweeping, repairing, cleaning. while Adrian sat at the table, numb, eating the dinner that had gone cold. By morning, the house looked like a home again. By morning, he felt like a ghost inside it. The next blow came from Clara's own parents. They had learned the truth about the drugs, the affairs, the crash, the lies. They confronted Clara. They begged her to seek help. They offered rehab, support, shelter. She refused. She screamed at them, told them they were controlling her, claimed they were suffocating her growth. When they insisted she choose recovery or leave their property, she left, ran straight back to the people who were destroying her. And Adrian finally understood something that hurt more than betrayal. She didn't want to be saved. Adrian's attorney pushed harder than ever. And it worked. He won full custody. There should have been relief, victory, triumph. There wasn't. Only grief. Crushing, suffocating grief. Because moments after the ruling, Clara was hospitalized with injuries inflicted by the same people she had chosen over her family. Adrian sat in his car outside the hospital, gripping the steering wheel, feeling like he was drowning. He couldn't go inside. He wasn't allowed. He wasn't her emergency contact anymore. But even if he had been, he didn't know if he had the strength. And the worst part was, he still loved her. Even now. Even after everything. The court hearings grew uglier. Evidence surfaced. Screenshots, group chats, messages that exposed just how deeply Clara had been manipulated and used. One woman, trembling on the witness stand, admitted she had introduced Clara to drugs and to men. She said it with no shame, like she was describing a party trick. Clara didn't cry. She didn't look up. She didn't speak. She just stared at the table in front of her, like her soul had left her body months ago. Adrian sat there feeling like someone had carved him open with a dull knife. He barely recognized the woman he'd married. He barely recognized himself. But the worst was still coming. Clara's overdose hit like a hammer to the chest. They found her in a park restroom, cold, unconscious, barely breathing. Her parents called Adrian in hysterics. The hospital placed her in a secure facility. The court ordered mandatory rehabilitation. And for the first time in months, Adrian felt something like hope, not for their marriage, for her life. He even offered to pay for part of the treatment, slipping the envelope to her father with quiet, steady words. She deserves a chance, he said, even if she doesn't want it. But when her father left, Adrian felt a heaviness in his chest. He couldn't shake. Like he knew this was her last chance. Like he knew she wouldn't take it. The threats started next. Shouted from passing cars, left as voicemails, sent from burner numbers. Adrian braced for war, but the war never came because someone else stepped in. Nathan Briggs. He confronted them, Clara's collective, at a bar on the outskirts of town. Adrian heard later that Nathan walked in alone and left them terrified enough to confess everything to the police. "Leave him alone," Nathan had told them, "or I'll make sure every one of you ends up in a cell." They listened, and Adrian was left with the quiet realization that he wasn't just losing his wife. He was losing the woman she used to be, because the real Clara, the one he married, hadn't been here for a long time. He just didn't know. The end was already written, already coming, already inevitable. Clara never walked out of the rehabilitation center. Adrian received the call on a quiet Thursday morning while packing school lunches. The phone buzzed on the counter, And when he answered, a trembling voice said the words that would scar his children forever. "Mr. Mercer, I'm so sorry. Clara passed away last night." For a moment, Adrian couldn't breathe. He stood there, one hand gripping the counter, the other still holding the phone, long after the voice stopped speaking. The room spun, and the world seemed to fold into a narrow, suffocating tunnel. He wanted to scream. He wanted to collapse. He wanted to deny it. But all he managed was a whisper. "How?" "An overdose," the voice said softly. "We tried to revive her. It was too late. Too late." 2 words that cut deeper than betrayal ever had. He told the children that evening. It was the worst moment of his life. Daniel asked if his mother was just sleeping somewhere. Avery asked if she could visit her after the doctors fix her. Sam, the youngest, didn't say anything. He just curled into Adrian's chest and cried until his tiny body shook. Their grief broke Adrian in a way nothing else had. For hours he held them, whispering, "I'm here. I've got you. You're safe. I'm not going anywhere." But inside, a part of him was dying, because no matter what Clara had done, no matter how far she had fallen, she had been theirs. Their mother, his wife, the woman he'd once believed he would grow old with. And now she was gone. Not by choice, not by illness, not by some tragic accident, but by a series of broken decisions that led her farther and farther away from the family that loved her. The days that followed were a blur, the arrangements, the paperwork, the condolences, the silence. Friends helped where they could, mostly by keeping the kids occupied, cooking meals, and giving Adrian space to breathe. But every night, when the house finally grew quiet, he broke down. He cried for the woman Clara used to be, for the family they once were, for the life that could have been different if anyone had reached her sooner. He cried for the love that didn't die, but was buried alive beneath betrayal, bravado, poison, and shame. Some nights, he hated her for what she'd done. Some nights, he hated himself for not saving her. Most nights, he hated the world that swallowed her whole. His friends stayed close, Lucas, Ryan, Matthew. They never pried, never judged. They simply let him fall apart and helped him stand again when he was ready. And one evening, after the children were asleep, Lucas said quietly, "She wasn't the enemy, Adrian. She was a victim who never learned how to ask for help." Adrian nodded, but the words only deepened his ache, because he had tried to help, and she had pushed him away. What haunted him now was not the betrayal. It was how deeply she must have been hurting. Life, cruel as ever, continued. School drop-offs, work deadlines, doctor visits, bills, birthdays. Adrian forced himself to show up, even when every cell in his body wanted to stay in bed. The children grieved in different ways. Daniel became protective. Avery got angry. Sam asked questions no 5-year-old should ever ask about life and death. Adrian answered as gently as he could, and every answer tore him open all over again. But slowly, painfully slowly, their home began to heal. Routine returned, laughter returned, light returned in cautious flickers, and eventually, after months of shock and heartbreak, something else returned too. Adrian's ability to breathe without guilt. The investigation into Clara's old circle didn't end with her death. Nathan Briggs stood by Adrian's side every step of the way, supporting him, advising him, and pushing for justice. The group was arrested piece by piece. Dealers, recruiters, manipulators, abusers, parasites. They folded quickly under pressure. Files surfaced, messages, recordings, statements. The truth was ugly. Clara had been exploited by people who fed on vulnerability and dragged others down to survive. One woman admitted in court she wanted to stop. She said she missed her family. We told her going back would make her weak. Adrian sat through every hearing. Sometimes he shook with anger. Sometimes he wanted to walk out. But he stayed. For Clara. For the children. For the truth. And when the final sentencing was read, he felt no satisfaction. Only the numb, hollow relief of a storm finally ending. But not ending cleanly. Not ending peacefully. Ending the way storms always end. By leaving behind wreckage that would take years to rebuild. Adrian tried therapy. Some days he talked, some days he couldn't. He rarely spoke about Clara's betrayal anymore, but he often spoke about her pain. And slowly, piece by piece, he rebuilt himself around the parts of the past he couldn't change. He learned that love doesn't erase wrongdoing. And betrayal doesn't erase love. And grief can coexist with anger in the same fractured heart. He learned forgiveness wasn't about saying someone did no harm. It was about choosing not to let the harm define you. And when his youngest son asked one night, "Is Mommy still part of our family?" Adrian held him close and whispered, "She always will be." Years later, Adrian stood in the backyard he once shared with Clara, watching his children play under a sky washed gold by the setting sun. Avery laughed as Sam chased her. Daniel worked patiently on fixing the garden fountain. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real, honest, quiet, and his. The pain never fully disappeared, but it softened, faded around the edges, became a scar he learned to live with. Not a wound, a reminder of love, of loss, of survival, of the darkness people hide, even from themselves. And sometimes when the wind rustled the trees just right, Adrian imagined Clara standing there with them. The old Clara, the one he fell in love with, smiling softly, as if to say, "I'm sorry, and thank you, and goodbye." He closed his eyes, breathed deeply, and let the last of his anger drift away. Because in the end, he didn't win. He didn't lose. He simply lived. And sometimes that was the bravest thing a man could do.